What does compassion for men look like? Same with empathy. What does empathy for men look like? Having asked myself those questions, I've been kind of left with a even more provocative question, and that is compassion and empathy for men enough? Stow that thought away for a bit. In my last video, I spoke about men as being regarded as death objects. I spoke about how men in a social and evolutionary context, they've been cast in a sort of catch-22 situation in which if there aren't man enough, they could be killed, but if they won't allow themselves to be killed, then there are no man. Death, destruction, and self-sacrifice for the sake of servitude towards women in society has been seen as the standard for men, and in many ways, even today, is seen as the normative view for men. A man being a death object is to have his entire existence as a male individual physically and metaphysically disposed of for what society thinks are the greater ends usually ending up being women. Excuses range from the matricentrist argument that makes the case allegedly many times more important women as mothers for the sake of human survival, kind of using that tribalistic or communal argument, as if fathers relatively matter not. And I'll point out that, ironically, some of these people advocate for fathers, so there's a bit of irony there, to the gynocentric cliches of how weak and delicate and without agency women are, and how they're the fairer sex, and that they need our worship and eternal service, and that's just so hard to be a woman in this world, and it's our duty as men to be the adults for them. If disposability and expendability are the standards applied to men, in essence what is being said is that men are subhuman compared to women. A mindset such as this, apparently global and differing only in permutations, says that men are undeserving of the same regard of humanity that women, whether well off or not, enjoy. It's the height of irony, actually, that the species is even called man or mankind, by the way. This societal mindset tells men that if you are born male, your only destiny is to willingly walk into oblivion. It tells men that he doesn't deserve humanity, but the negation of it. The desire for male disposal is well mainstream. Pop science journalists enjoy their quaint pontifications on the Y chromosome and how it's either too small, a mutation, or is dying out, all because it is the story that seems to sell. And in visual media, real animals seem to enjoy more dignity than some men who are consistently cast in the role of anything from dimwit, inept bumbler of routine activity, domesticated or undomesticated animal, an animal in any case, rather, and anything to laugh at and discard, like yesterday's funnies column in the daily newspaper. Self-important assholes like Hannah Rosen chortle about the supposed end of men. Cretins like Valerie Solanas can write an entire manifesto about cutting up men and have the book become essential reading in universities. And feminist Sally Miller Gearhart can postulate that the proportion of men must be reduced and maintained at approximately 10% of the population, only for her accompanying slogan, "The future is female," an approximation of it, to be the most accepted mainstream catchphrases in recent memory. And yet, allegedly, it is the patriarchy that needs to be smashed. Allegedly, it is masculinity that is toxic. Because we can't talk about it enough, despite the fact that male genital mutilation, long marketed as circumcision, is not unknown to the public to cause pain at the very least and even death, boys are downright expected in the United States and other select places in the world to endure the worst pain in their lives at 8 days old, if even that late. Endure that or die. If this is not indifference to male infants' risk of death, then it's a desire to see them undergo it. Such a desire can only be rightly interpreted as an act of malice and hatred of boys for being boys, and the hatred of the man he would become, or would have had he not died in the process. The attitude is to maintain the status of subhumanity for men and boys. Only in this way can a society maintain acts of evil with a cloak of indifference. The continued normative attitude towards MGM must be rightly seen as a desire for male disposal, or at the very least, male mitigation. Watch my video, Gender Mutilation is Gender Mitigation for Traditionalists, for more on that subject. To boil all this down, demand for men is high basically only in one respect: to use once and destroy, like perhaps your next cigarette. The value of men, it appears, is in their valuelessness as humans. Oh, they'll do the dirty jobs and they'll do things of value to society and get themselves probably killed or somewhat damaged, at least in the process, in the defense of others, but he's not human. He's merely a means to an end. Demand of this has always been high. It is ultimately no wonder that altruism is considered a mainstream moral standard. It's the key moral needed for men to continue to denigrate themselves in the name of servicing the greater good. We appeal in excess to women's humanity. Humanity is the key argument against what we refer to as inhumanity, that which we call horrific violation of rights. As a thought experiment, imagine any of the injustices mentioned in this video thus far applied to women, actually. How would you respond? Do you wince more than you did about the men? Did you by chance think, oh, not the women, we can't allow that, can't have that now, can we? Are you on white knight alert and prepared to come to the aid of these poor women, perhaps at the expense of your own well-being? But what is humanity anyway? And I don't mean the species, but the concept. What does it mean to be human? Humanity's uniqueness comes from his acute awareness of his existence, his place in the world and in the universe, and perhaps some awareness about how limited his time can be. It's his awareness of identity, that the sum of his memories and experiences must matter somehow to the universe. Humanity is about becoming liberated from the stupor, the autopilot state that animals of the wild operate on, that we call instinct, that which we mistakenly think humans operate on a larger scale than we probably actually do. By the way, arguing for humanity and even in particular for men on the basis of instinct is actually a horrific mistake, so careful with that. But perhaps that is a video for another time. Anyway, humanity is the birth of the individual. It's the beginning of the individual. The beginning of humanity is the beginning of the individual. Humanity is the realization that we of the human race, man or woman, are all individuals with the same dignity due. Humanity matters because it is about the individual. Being human is all about being the individual. I'm going to beat that into your head for a bit because this needs to sink in. It's about the individual. That's what humanity is all about. It is with sheer irony that too many people from various worldviews see women as more collectivistic, while it is the men that are more individualistic. This is a fatal mistake. The refusal to see women as being individuals will doom the cause of men, no less than saying women have no agency. Only the recognition that women are individuals and have agency can women be held accountable as adults. The refusal to acknowledge women as individuals is the same as saying that they cannot possibly be held accountable. If you resign to this notion, then you are no better than feminists who enforce female collectivism. Your defeatism makes you no less complicit. It's also ironic, actually, that having established women as the non-individual, that women become so bestowed with such regards of humanity. Again, humanity is about the individual. You're going to have to remind yourself of this constantly. You know, the less individualistic sex is rewarded more humanity somehow. And the allegedly more individualistic sex has their humanity relinquished to the less individualistic. For what possible purpose that actually means anything would this be done? Now, looking at the big picture, keeping in mind what I just said, that humanity and being human is about being the individual, I can't stress this enough. Men are denied their humanity despite, or perhaps because, they are seen as the more individualistic sex. Women, on the other hand, are affirmed their humanity many times over, again in excess, despite or perhaps because they are seen as the less individualistic sex. What is wrong with this picture? Never mind even about how society views which sex is more or less individualistic. What is inextricable is that men and women of the same human race are individuals and must be treated as such. They both deserve the regard of humanity and therefore be given the same dignity as individuals. The problem, truly, is that one's humanity is regarded well above the other. I present to you the humanity gap. The humanity gap is maintained by valuing women as valuable human beings, while at the same time, quote unquote, valuing men for being the opposite. Women, in this way, are valued in such an excess that it takes something more than themselves to safeguard it. Therefore, the task is assigned to men to become the role of the sex valued for having no actual intrinsic value. For the sake of the really valuable, for the sake of the actual humans, the women, in other words, because men are subhuman, remember? Some might argue that men must earn their humanity. At least that's the kind of way this state of valuelessness has been sold to men, but even that is a sham. The humanity is still precarious, even after a man goes through the trouble of having earned it. And herein lies something that's bugged me as of late, specifically back on the subject of compassion and empathy for men. I get it, you need to let that part sink in. I've gone all video about how fundamentally unfair, so inhuman men have been treated, and here I am talking about taking issue with compassion and empathy for men. What the hell am I thinking here? Before you hit that dislike button and shut off this video, there is a point to this. More specifically, what's on my mind about this is how compassion and empathy manifests itself after all has been said here, like in this video. So I ask again, what does compassion for men look like? What does empathy for men look like? It's easy for us in the larger men's movement to talk about compassion and empathy for men because, certainly we need it. If we speak about compassion for men without addressing what is in essence the humanity gap, compassion looks something like this. Thank you for having sacrificed your well-being and even your life for the sake of all of us who are not like you. Thank you for being the downtrodden. We love and are grateful that you've negated your life for us to harvest. Here is your pat on the back. Here is some money. Here is some increased status, which without it, our society decides you simply don't deserve the same humanity as women who have gotten their humanity for free and much more with it. Now, here's a little bit of what we call respect. Here is some extra concern and attention. Here are some more words of support. We can't free you from the state you are in, assuming you aren't dead from it yet, but we can make it a little bit more worth your while as you keep it up for all our sakes. We keep on seeing calls for compassion for men by people who aren't even demanding that men even live life for their own sake. We keep on seeing calls for compassion and empathy without necessarily demanding that men be liberated from this state of disposability. These are the same people that thank men strictly for what they do for society, never for themselves, and at the expense of their own person. As far as I can see, they want to keep up that status quo. I am not convinced otherwise. Now, empathy is different enough from compassion, right? It's different from sympathy. It's about actually feeling one's pain and building on the fact that we are able to find something to relate to, whether it's an actual experience that, they've individually experienced, or maybe somebody close to them that underwent something similar to the person they're empathizing with. I will cut it a bit of slack, but without some semblance of optimism and a clear vision to change not only one's outlook on how men should be regarded, but with a hope that you can persuade others and get them to share in the outlook, empathy amounts to not much more than commiseration. I know I sound harsh here, but every time I see a call for compassion and empathy, but at the same time, the person making the call speaks nothing of what we can do to make some serious changes from within, and I believe that there are serious changes we can make, by the way, more on that in a bit, then this is what I see compassion and empathy amounting to. A meaningful compassion is not one that resigns to the disposability of males, but merely adds acts of concern just to get him through it or make him feel better about it. I would rather a form of compassion that can bring out a force of vitality in a man that can inspire him to escape society's shackles of expectation of what it means to be a man in terms of how it benefits a society of women making the expectations, and liberate himself from disposability and expendability. A meaningful empathy is not simple commiseration or increased love for doing the same sacrificial self-destructive things. If you can connect with another person, having undergone the same trials you have, then through that connection, you can engage in a form of empathy that can inspire the other to the same sort of optimistic vision that you have in your own right. Of course, you must have the vision on your own yourself. So, while empathy is a fine idea, you have to find that spark of standing on your own 2 feet and defying the peripheral noise of calls to male obligation and duty for the sake of the greater good. Have that, and you can inspire that in others. What men need above all is the semblance that their existence as male individuals, as masculine entities, both physical and metaphysical, matter to themselves first, and is only for the outside world to observe and embrace, and not to subordinate and break. What men need above all is an ultimate sense of humanity, because they are human no less than women. They are individual no less than women. What's more, men and masculinity are not prescribed roles males have to perform in society. The content of a man's character is more important than what men and women of society expect him to be. You are not women's or anybody's death object. Say to yourself, I am not a death object. You don't exist to die. You don't live as an end to another just because you are male. This recognition of humanity is the thing that can bring man out of the morass of drudgery and a futile and self-negating existence. And it is about time that the men's movement, which I am unapologetically a part of and want to see it expand and successfully reach its goals, step up its game on the individualist case for men's issues.